Welcome all. My name is Stephen, and I want to take time to share with you something that's near and dear to my heart with literacy instruction and is also my trend research. It's having to do with motivation in a literacy classroom and the belief that a student has within themselves as a reader. And so this is my trend project for Reading 7262 Fall 2017. Now, my project might look a little different. I didn't necessarily take the rubric and go step by step, as listed out by Dr. Roberts, and copy and paste the standard or the exemplary category. I've sort of made a conglomerate of all the standards together to highlight culture, to highlight differences, to highlight diversity, while covering all of the different requirements. And so we're going to start off with why literacy, motivation, and growth mindset is huge, because when we talk about reading or just learning overall, the perception and the definition of it are something that changes. I think as more research comes out and we learn more about the students in which we teach, I think our perception of motivation evolve. I think, though, that there are some definite things that don't change. And we do know that our goal is to make our students proficient in reading, and a person's ability to read is a foundational skill that's started at a young age, from the concepts of print and early literacy all the way up until adulthood. They're learning, and they should be evolving and changing, and if they're not motivated to read, you're going to start to see these gaps appear. And so it says on my slide here, therefore, for students to master the necessary skills and strategies, children must commit the time and effort to learn them. Thus, students must be motivated to learn. And it's interesting when we talk about motivation, because I think as a student gets older, you begin to see a shift. As with a younger reader, I think, a lot of buy-in involves the teacher, and students aren't too sure how to gauge their own learning. I mean, you might give them some sense of control, but through the teacher's attitude and the emphasis placed on literacy, students are motivated to read. But the older they get, even as early as, third, fourth, and fifth grade, you begin to see this shift. And I think this is because they begin to understand themselves more as learners. And once they get to this age, it's very pivotal that the students make the choice to learn literacy, because otherwise, once they get to middle school, their chance of reading is going to diminish. And then if that continues on its track by high school, college, adulthood, reading is not going to take the forefront of anything. And so often you'll see teachers spend a lot of time trying to motivate their students. As an elementary student, I disliked reading because I never got to receive the extrinsic prize, okay? And when we're talking motivation in learning, whether literacy or just overall, there's an extrinsic and an intrinsic. And the extrinsic, although it gets the students going initially, if there's not a relay over to that intrinsic motivation, there's going to be little buy-in from the student later on, and I think you're not going to see as much success. And so when we're talking about motivation, a good audience to consider is motivating your English language learners. In addition to your normal, I wouldn't say normal, but your large body of students, you also have the English language learners. And it says here that culturally diverse students tend to have more adversities in reading due to their lack in their second language vocabulary, and that's proven true. And in L's perception of reading, it's shown that although these students face hurdles, they still find their motivational piece. We can't count out these students, this group of students, because they're just culturally different. I think it takes an extra amount of effort on our part to see what really makes them motivated. Because I was talking to a friend, and just different cultures place different values on education. I think but the students need to be guided by a knowledgeable educator, and I think that's a huge piece. And here we continue on. It says that the keys to motivating these learners were fostered through cognitive student choices, autonomy, interactive activities, and like I highlighted already, the teacher attitude. And in Howard's research, she debunked another research study here that says that ELs need linguistically simplistic text. The world's not going to cut the students slack, and I think while teaching them to read on their instructional level is crucial to them developing their own proficiency, I think exposure to grade level text is essential. Watering down is not going to help them become better readers nor increase their motivation, because they'll begin to notice that the older they are, and also their peer groups will begin to notice that. And so later in the discussion, she noted that students involved revealed in interviews that they were not motivated as much by programs such as Accelerated Reader, because we have that issue. I think at our school we have a program called Raz Kids where you just leave them, and for RTI, we use this program of Raz Kids, and they must get their 30 minutes in. And when we leave those students on there, they're aimlessly clicking. They still need someone to step in and intervene and give a motivating piece or guide or challenge. And I think that's why this Accelerated Reader program had little success with English language learners and with me as a student in elementary school. And here's the funny thing. Although they didn't like the program, they exceeded the required book amount because they put the success on the parents. They put the success on a relationship with someone else. If someone else puts value on it, if someone else holds them accountable, if someone else is walking along that path with them, such as their parents, such as their teachers, such as their peers, that is one of the most powerful pieces a teacher can use, is that relationship. And another key piece to promote literacy and motivate students to read is the atmosphere itself. You've got to, and when you initially think atmosphere, you think of the way the room looks. Yes, that's a piece of it, but it's the way the room sounds, it's the terminology used. There's a lot of things. And so this research study, the qualitative study I looked at, considered the environment in a preschool classroom. They state that in addition to intrinsic factors that motivate reader, an aesthetic environment, technology, and teaching procedures, say beyond that, the way it looks, are influential to a student's reading. Okay? And I said here, while I agree with their research, environment can only take a student so far in motivation. So, such having a beautiful reading corner where there's big pillows and posters and all of these things, what's going to happen when they go to the next grade level? What's going to happen when they're at home? They might not have that pretty pillow. They might not have that colorful poster. So it doesn't go all the way. And it says also altering a physical environment might not reach all. I mean, to some, having an altered physical environment, especially those with you're talking different needs and diversity. You're talking those with ADHD or Asperger's or students with disability. For some, that might be overstimuli. So you've really got to consider all parts here. The thing I like is that the teaching procedure, the technology integration that this research study points, because when that is really the focus and it all rotates around literacy, that's huge. When teachers take time to integrate literacy into other content areas, that I think would increase motivation. That's a part of the atmosphere. Does the teacher value literacy enough to discuss it and make it revolve around all practices in the classroom? And like we stated when we're talking about relevance and when we're talking about motivating, we need to focus on the intrinsic factors and less extrinsic. Although they might be helpful to get the initial hook, you need more to develop it later on. And so here we talk about cultures again, and this study focused on teaching students to learn an ancient language that's not necessarily spoken. And here's a few facts I want to share with it. First, people who are intrinsically motivated to read rather than extrinsic tend to have more adaptive learning behaviors and higher academic achievement. Okay? That's not a surprise, honestly, when you think about it. The ones who read are going to naturally read, and it's you could call it the go-to line for a teacher. To become a better reader, you've got to read, and good readers are good writers, and you could go back to that. But when you're really talking about it, the kids who actually read are developing more skills that they can take with them, or different strategies to attacking a piece. And I believe that this is true. And also another thing is that students in this case particularly, and in classrooms across America, see relevance. They saw relevance in the language, even though it was ancient and not many people spoke it. They saw relevance in it and said, hey, I've got to put time into this to learn it. Bottom line. And so it says that lastly, the vicious cycle of poor reading and performance and motivation worsens. If they don't like reading in first grade, you don't really address it and get the students hooked, you're not going to fix it in second grade. It's going to start to have that snowball effect. And it sort of explains why you see less and less students read as they go through their school career. And so you're asking yourself, what's the connection? What's going on here? And I already sort of touched on a couple slides back that parents and the relationships are key to a student's success as an overall learner. The value placed on home on literacy, the value placed at school on literacy is going to eventually say to the student, hey, literacy needs to take a precedence in my career, in my life. And research after research will point to that. And it's also that belief in themselves as a reader. If they're not motivated and if they don't develop these skills that we were talking about in the last slide, we're not going to ever have these students believe that they are capable of doing it. And I mean, imagine going into battle and not ever having training. I mean, we're expecting students to just become proficient readers overnight. No. That's not true. I mean, reading takes practice. Reading takes intentional and specific skill instruction, especially at the younger levels. And in order to do that, helps those students believe that they're readers. And it's simply the belief that mistakes help us learn. A lot of students, feel like they can't read out loud because the atmosphere is not right. It's not a comfortable atmosphere where they can read and make mistakes. They don't interact with books. And so with the growth mindset in reading, students are keen to receive information to expand their knowledge. When they believe they can, they will. That is so true. Attitude is everything. Attitude and belief in oneself will take you a lot further than just skills alone. And so it says here that if students had this approach and teachers encouraged this, there would be more reading. Just natural reading. Sometimes, and I had a student a couple of years ago pick up this huge book. I said, although you want to read this book, I'm just not sure it's going to work right now independently, but let's look at it together. Let's take turns. Let's work this out, and let's try to find you something where you can have success. And so we're talking about instructional strategies. We're talking about including things in our instruction. We've got to be deliberate. As teachers, we need to say, okay, I need to get my students motivated to learn, motivated to read, and what might my classroom look like if I was to do this? And one way is allowing student choice in the process, whether that's book selection, whether that's the final product, whether that's how you read in groups or in partners or digitally or not. Choice is huge. Providing students with language barriers with audiobooks, letting them hear good reading. That's going to help a struggling reader to hear good reading being modeled through read-alouds, through audio stories. There's nothing more I can say there. And then when we're talking with writing, students have personal word dictionaries, personalized instruction. Generic instruction, although, is there, it still needs to be tailored to the learner. So as they're writing, if they continue to misspell a word, don't tell the kid, I'm sorry, I'm not looking it up for you. Rather, give them a personal bank of words that they can use and keep in a dictionary so that they can reference. Also, you could include that in your spelling instruction. And then the last one is, you're talking more adolescent readers and maybe starting 4th, 5th, and beyond is utilizing books such as high interest, low readability. Because a lot of middle school students who are low readers don't want to read books because the ones that they have to read are not interesting or they're not, applicable to them. They're like, oh my gosh, I have to read this book. Why? It's so embarrassing. So this sort of gives them that belief that, ooh, I'm reading something interesting while reaching and meeting their needs. That's pretty cool. Because remember, the mindset that they are a reader is important, and embarrassing them is not how to do it. So, as I'm coming to a close, we're going to start thinking of a couple things here. We've got to think about what strategies can we use. One way to increase motivation is through learning goals. Students there's a real term. Students have to know where they are in order to improve. And they need things that are measurable. If you set small goals, such as a fluency goal, okay, although you're behind on your reading and you're reading at 87 words per minute, let's shoot for 97. And here's how we're going to do it. Then when that student reaches that goal, that satisfaction is reached. Then you set another goal. Okay, you're at 97. Let's go for 110 this time. We're going to continue to use these strategies. Second one is to use intentional opportunities, for students to join together in learning communities, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's virtually, and letting them share their perspectives on reading. That is huge. Not saying that, there's certain things that shouldn't be gathered overall, such as comprehension or understanding, but using theories like Rosenblatt's reader response theory, joining in together and sharing what you got out of a text. When you get to share your feelings, it really adds value to you because someone's like, wow, I had that thought too. That's really cool. The next one is to provide students with ownership of their learning that's meaningful. Don't just give them, allow them to put their name on a bookmark. That's not meaningful. Although, yes, they're showing ownership of something. But when the student becomes the focal point of literacy instruction, when they actually have authentic ways to personalize instruction, they're more motivated to participate. It makes them feel valued. Anytime I feel valued, I can tell you I put in more of an effort. And this one is, I sort of heard this phrase from our instructional coach, and I was like, I got to use this in my presentation. And I asked her, It is that learning's not supposed to look like silos. Take time to incorporate content area material into literacy instruction. As I stated before, when you put literacy as the center, as the hub, as the priority, and everything revolves around it, in math you're writing, and reading you're writing, and social studies you're writing, and in science you're writing, they are seeing, wow, writing is something that is important to me, that I need to do, that I can do, regardless of what subject I'm in. And so there are many resources you can use, such as Google Platform, and to type responses or do research. Too specific. And one I really like that, as I'm in 5th grade this year, I definitely think it's valuable, is NoReading, because this tailors reading passages to students' likes. So they're taking a survey at the beginning. Upon registration, they take their interest, and then they take those words and the things they like, such as TV shows and actors and foods, and they incorporate them within the reading that they're doing. So they're like, oh, this is about something I like. I mean, I like reading about things that interest me. The second one is Newsela, or Newsela, because it places reading in a more current events model. It's informational text, which is highlighted upon by Common Core standards. It's also, could tie to content areas. And one way that my teammate uses it that I really think is important, in order, when we're talking about goal setting and showing measurable belief and all of these things, is that she prints the 2 or 3 levels of the passage. She prints the 2nd grade level, she'll print the 5th grade level, she'll print the 7th grade level, and they'll begin to point out differences to say, oh, the vocabulary between the 2nd grade and the 7th grade is vastly different. Or look at the sentence length. That is powerful when students see what's being done and they're using it as a tool, not just go read this passage, go sit down. Okay? And in closing, I chose a quote by Malcolm X, and I said they spoke truth when he said, anyone who has read a great deal can imagine the new world that reading opened. And, for the past 23 minutes, you might think Simon has just ranted on, he's gone on and on, but reading motivation, and when I chose this topic, is something that is passionate to me. And when we connect students to literacy, when we make them believe in themselves and encourage them to read things that interest them and begin to get that intrinsic motivation flowing, students are connected to new worlds. They're going to make new discoveries. They're going to become more knowledgeable in areas. They're going to become more well-rounded individuals. And that new world is just amazing. From a personal standpoint, it was really hard for me not to be able to read and be motivated to do such. And it was, and a lot of you may have heard, the sophomore year of college was really that moment where it just clicked and I said, wow, I was connected to this new world. And now it's like a catching up period. And I'm going back and I'm like, wow, 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 wow. And I'm like, can I provide that for a student earlier? Can I make a student be motivated? Can students really find things that interest them and make them love learning and make them love reading? And here at the end are my references to the articles that were provided. I thoroughly enjoyed having the opportunity to share with you today my thoughts on reading motivation. I hope you gathered something from it as much as I did through the process, and I want to thank you for listening. Bye-bye.